The Fat Director had found out about 87546's mistreatment of the other engines, and as such, confined him to the sheds at Knapford. Since 87546 couldn't leave the sheds, there was another problem. Who would do his work? The Fat Director had finally decided to give this job to 98462, another engine who arrived to the island on loan to help out. 98462 did a relatively good job handling his and 87546's work, but I'm sorry to say, coupled with praises from the Fat Director and passengers alike, he had gained a big smoke box and thought that he was capable of doing more work from other engines, which poor Edward would find out one day. Only a few weeks passed since Edward had taken his passenger train. It had been Edward's first day out in a long time. Almost all the engines had given Edward their full support. However, two didn't. Gordon and 98462 were quite displeased with Edward. 98462 was one of the 3 engines brought on trial to the island by the Fat Director. He didn't have a name, just a number. He and Gordon had a great deal in common. They were both rude and cocky. But 98462 never knew when enough was enough. You finally managed to make it out of the station, cackled 98462 one night as Edward backed into the sheds. Edward had just returned from his passenger run, and he was feeling quite proud. What a useless engine you are, Edward. I'm sure we'll be hearing plenty of complaints from the passengers tomorrow. You must have been running late all day. The others gave 98462 a foul look, but Edward just smiled. Actually, we were right on time. I'm very happy to be useful again. Edward knew that as long as he didn't let 98462's words bother him, then the engine wouldn't berate him for long. Soon enough, without getting any sort of reaction from Edward, the big blue bully drifted off to sleep. As Edward was now working regularly on passenger trains, the Fat Director extended the timetable to run later in the evenings. This now meant that Edward, Gordon, and 98462 would be running the passenger services all across the island. Edward had his doubts, but was determined to work hard. Fortunately for him, he ran the loop line, so he only saw Gordon and 98462 at the big station. A few weeks passed. Edward thought his trains were getting heavier and heavier, or he was getting older and older. The other engines had noticed this, and offered to help Edward. Oh, no thank you, hinted Edward. You have your own trains to manage. We can't upset the Fat Director's timetable. Little did Edward know, 98462 had heard everything, and he made a plan. Edward had arrived to the big station to collect his first passenger train. When he arrived, he saw that there were no coaches. Thomas must have woken up late again, he thought. He was just about to go collect some more when he saw 98462 came hooting and wheeshing into the platform with Edward's coaches. No need to fret. I'll be taking your coaches today, Edward. We mustn't upset the Fat Director's timetable. He laughed loudly as the guard blew his whistle, and he set off. Edward was upset, but he thought it was best to get on with his work. That evening, Edward was backing up into his berth as 98462 was boasting loudly. We don't need Edwin anymore. I've proven I can manage 2 trains at once. Why keep him around when all he does is get in the way? Edward helped building the rails that you run on, fumed Thomas. Without him, none of us would have a railway to work on. 98462 interjected. Edward is a thing of the past now. Us faster, stronger, and bigger engines are more up to date than old iron. Edward finally gave up. He decided to take a stand against 98462. Just then, Winston, another engine who was on trial, arrived at the sheds, and he saw that Edward was feeling very sad. Is everything okay, Edward? Asked Winston. You seem upset. Oh, I'm fine, said Edward. Just tired is all, he said, trying to not worry Winston. Oh, but something is the matter, said Henry, and he explained the whole story to Winston. When he finished, Winston felt very cross. We should tell the fat director, said Winston. He'll send his sorry tender away. No, it's fine, interjected Edward. I can handle this on my own. But Winston wasn't convinced. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual to collect his coaches and make it to the platform before 98462. The yard was silent, and Edward felt sure he had beaten 98462. And what do you think you're doing? Fussed 98462. Edward tried to sound brave. Collecting my coaches for my passenger train. I don't think so, said 98462. You are old and slow, and you shall wait in your shed till you are sent away, or even better, scrapped. Edward's heart sank, but not for long. What do you think you're doing? Babbled a familiar voice. It was the fat director. Collecting my train, sir, implied 98462, trying to sound as innocent as he could. From what I've just seen, that is not the case at all. I've had passenger complaints saying that they were taken to the wrong stations, and fellow workers complaining about your treatment of others. 98462's face went as white as a ghost. My engines, the fat director went on, help other engines and work hard. You have done neither of those things. And let me remind you, I have brought you here to work on trial, and I can see you are not a fit for my railway. You shall stay at the old sheds at Knapford with 87546 until I can trust you again. Is that clear? 98462 couldn't muster up a response, so he just puffed away to the sheds, glaring at Edward. As 98462 puffed away, the fat director went to talk to Edward. You must understand, Edward, you are one of my engines. You might not think so, but you aren't alone on this railway. If you have any troubles, you must come and see me right away. Edward could see from his warm smile that the fat director was told everything. He looked across to the yards and he saw Henry, Thomas, and Winston smiling with glee back at him. Now, you have a train to pull. Then after that, I want you to have a nice long rest. As Edward set off, he felt his position on the fat director's railway was secure, and from that day on, he never had issues with big blue engines thinking they're better than him. But until Gordon, oh wait, I mustn't tell you more, or I shall spoil the next story.